Hello. This is the first video in a series of short videos that we're titling St. John the Divine's Financial Situation, Serious but Not Fatal. I'm Erin Kelly. I'm a member of the Parish Council, and I'm here with David Buckman, who is our fearless treasurer. Hi, David.
Hi.
And the reason that we're doing this series of videos is to introduce all members of the congregation to our financial systems, to provide information about our current financial situation, and to try to ensure that everyone feels confident participating in discussions about future plans. We are going to have in this series 4 short videos as well as a longer bonus video that will be for people who really want to do a deeper dive into more detailed information about our budgeting system and how it all works. But today is our first, and I'm really excited. Our first topic is, what is our current financial situation? How would you describe our current financial situation?
I think you said it already in the title, Erin, serious but not fatal.
Okay.
Let's dig into this and say that our main problem, of course, is a chronic deficit.
Okay. So that you can slow down and help me to understand, I want to start with something really, really basic. What is a deficit? What do we mean when we say deficit?
That's a key question. The simple explanation is it means you bring in less than you spend. To use an analogy, you as an employee at the university, for example, you have a salary
Mhm.
and you spend money on food, shelter, entertainment, your cat food, etc., etc. And if you are spending more than you're bringing in, you have a problem because you just run out of money. You can't meet your bills.
Okay. So then, if I understand this right, a deficit is when you are spending more than you're bringing in. And right now, St. John the Divine is spending more than it's bringing in. And so that means that we are in a deficit situation. Um, and to go with your analogy, if in my household I found that suddenly I was spending more than I was bringing in, I think the first thing I'd want to look at is what I was spending. So to see if I'm spending money in the wrong place or too much in one place, or if there's things that I could cut. And so, in terms of St. John the Divine, what do we spend money on?
That's the main question we want to talk about tonight.
Okay.
I'm going to show you a series of 4 charts,
Mhm.
very briefly each, but they're going to dig deep into explaining the statements we've made so far.
Mhm.
We're going to define, first of all, a couple of things. Each chart is going to show 5 years from 2018 through this year. And I'm using the budget, by the way, for 2022. So you've got 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. So
Okay.
we're going to look at the most recent 5 years, including this year.
Mhm.
Obviously, we don't know how this year has turned out, so we use the budget, but we are tracking the budget very closely. So um, the second thing I want to make quite clear is that we are using the term operating revenue and operating expenses or operating costs, largely because that's like your rent and your food and your um, any regular costs. It does
Okay.
not include, for example, your holiday or a present for a friend or something that is kind of an extra thing. So what we need to do is, first of all, begin, what are we spending money on day to day?
Okay.
Okay. Now,
Absolutely. No,
up
that's
front,
great.
up front, I just want to make one point, which we will keep coming back to, but you do have to remember it, that roughly half of what we spend on a weekly or daily basis, if you like, is on payroll.
Okay.
That's an underlying fact, which we will talk about more as we dig deeply into it. Having said that, I'm going to bring up a chart here, which will look at what we spend our money on. Yeah. Now, this is a very colorful chart because, of course, the colors mean something. But as I said before, the first column here is the 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, 22. And of course, the scale is very important. It goes from 0 to 700. And
Mhm.
that sadly is not $700, but it's $700,000, just to
Okay.
get the scale right here. Okay.
Wow. Hmm.
Now, the other thing to realize is that I've taken an average of all these 5 years, and the bottom chunk, if you like, or bar is the largest. In this case, the blue here thing is for the actual the cost of our clergy, and that is the largest single item. In fact, it's about 26% of our total expenditure per year on average. And the simple thing about clergy is that it's 99% payroll. The clergy do not spend very much on other expenses at all. I mean, so basically that is their payroll, which of course is driven by A, how many we have, and B, how much is that going up because of the cost of living allowances, which are normally awarded each year, particularly in these inflationary times. Okay, so that's all we need to say about this blue bottom part of the chart. The next one up, and the second largest, is property. That takes about 21%. It's this sort of orangey thing sitting on top of the blue. That's the opposite of clergy in a way, because there's no payroll employees or staff. There is no payroll in that. It's simply a matter of a wide range of different costs, of which the largest factor actually is insurance, would you believe? Which has grown, as most people's have over recent years, and now takes 22% of our whole property budget. Second part of the property budget that's fairly large is 20%, which goes to our cleaner. And the third part is the utilities like heat and light. And the fourth big part, of course, is general repairs and maintenance, which is 18%, utilities for 19%. So across those four categories, you're basically accounting for 80% of that second largest area or part of our expenses. The next largest one, perhaps not surprisingly, is administration, or admin as we normally call it. That's only about 16% of our total. Property, as I said, was about 21%. So admin is about 16%, of which 55% is payroll, 12% is our external bookkeeper, 10% is printing and stationery, 6% is telephone and internet, and 5% is an external accountant. So it's a quick accumulation of what that goes on. It's a fairly wide range of things. So that's the gray bar there. The next bar above that, as you can see from the legend on the top, is actually diocese, and that's our assessment, which of course does not have any payroll in it because it's the tax we are paying each year to the diocese for being part of the diocese, and is set each year, of course, by a formula based on our financial performance in the year past.
Okay.
That's about 15%, as I've said, I think, of our total. The next one, which is the sort of bluish, lighter blue one, is worship and music, which is about 15% of our total. And of that, about 3/4, 76%, is the staff payroll, and another 13% goes for other musicians, which are mainly, of course, the choral and organ scholars. Now, why that's so much lower, and in fact, you can see it dropped in 2020 after a couple of fairly large years in 18-19, is that we started in 2020 to use the endowment funds, which we have, McRae for the choral scholars and Sutton for the organ scholars. These funds were invested back in the 1990s, I think, and they're earning money each year, and we think it's reasonable to offset the costs that we spend on the choral or the music scholars with revenue. We don't use all of it, we just use 90%. But I mean, so that's why there's only 13% of this light blue block is actually to pay musicians, and the rest of it is pretty small stuff like organ tuning and things like that. Finally, at the top, sitting on the top here in green, we have family and outreach, which is only about 6% of our total operating costs per year, and 83%, of course, of that is payroll for our part-time coordinator. That's the major expenditure, of course, in that area. So that's what makes up our gross operating costs per year. Okay.
Okay. And so what I see when I look at this chart is that There are a number of different things that we spend money on, and that all of them are important. These are all the things that we basically need to be spending money on in order to do the basic day-to-day stuff that people think of as the work that we do, paying clergy, making sure there's light and there's heat for the building, making sure that we have somebody to answer the phones, all of those kinds of things. And that while some of them are bigger than others, no one of them is, say, half or more than half. There is some distribution. And there are some different things in each of these categories. So that's really what I see as a pretty complex picture of lots of different things, lots of different bills that need to get paid. Does that seem right to you?
Absolutely. And
Right.
I just want to point out the two major things, of course, that are not included in
Mhm,
this because they're not operating costs.
mhm.
The most important one, in a sense, is outreach, where
Mm,
people, for example, put money in blue envelopes or other ways they contribute to the food bank or other outreach we do. That is, of course, not, and none of that is used to keep the doors open. And so that's not included in our operating costs.
okay.
Other big amount, which we'll talk about in a later video, is actually our projects or special projects where we spend money, for example, to upgrade the lighting or build an elevator from
Okay.
the lower hall up to the ground level, which, those are one-off things that you do, and they are projects which are separately financed, but they are not part of, as I said, keeping the doors open. So, okay.
So back to your really good analogy at the beginning, operating costs then are a lot like just my normal household budget of how much I spend on housing, how much I spend on groceries, how much I spend on electricity, those kinds of things. But my regular budget doesn't include holidays, it doesn't include gifts that I would get, and it doesn't include a one-off expense like my hot water heater breaks, so suddenly I need to get a new hot water heater. That those would be other funds because they're not that kind of regular day-to-day keep the trains running on time kind of spending, which is what operating expenses are. And so for the church, outreach and special projects are separate. What we're really talking about when we talk about operating costs is just the everyday stuff, the bills that have to get paid.
Absolutely.
Perfect. But since you said that, we uh, are in deficit spending and, clearly though we're paying some of these bills, they have to get paid. I go into St. John's and the lights are on, so somehow bills are getting paid. How do we pay these bills? Where does the money come from?
That's where we turn to the operating revenue or income.
Okay.
Now, this is much simpler because there are basically essentially two
Mm.
categories of operating revenue. And you can see the blue one is called givings, and that's a major part, of course, of our operating revenue,
Uh-huh.
or to use the analogy, our income or salary. Um, in early years before COVID, that was pushing $400,000 a year. The scale, of course, is the same, and there's the 400
Mm.
level. Of course, in 2020 and 21, we had COVID, and 22, although we're trying to come out of COVID, we're still affected by that. And
Oh.
as you can see, our givings have actually dropped by a fairly substantial sum. And of
Mm.
course, this whole trend is something that is partly causing our problem.
Mhm.
Because if your salary or revenue is going down, then you've got to cut your coat according to your cloth, to use the old saying.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
okay,
Uh-huh.
so that's our what our two, oh, by the way, I should explain probably what this Brown or rentals thing mainly is, and that's essentially Pacific Opera Victoria or POV. We have a 5-year lease with them, which brings in almost 80% of this total amount. So
Okay. And that money, it looks like we're not bringing in as much year to year, but since you said earlier that some of our costs include things like salaries, and salaries go up every year just because of cost of living, I can begin to see that if the money coming in is going down and the money that's going out is going up, how it is that we've got a problem. So, how big exactly is the mismatch between our expenses and our revenues?
I have a chart for that. And this is where we come back to that term deficit, because
Oh,
the operating deficit is simply the difference between our income and our outgo. And
mhm,
you remember our outgo was pushing 700,000, and
mhm,
our income was struggling to reach 400,000.
mhm.
So when you take one from the other, if you look for, I mean, again, the scale is the same, but the number's in red because, of course, it's a deficit. We're in the
Right.
red. In 2018 and 19, pre-COVID, we could get by because we had a $100,000 roughly operating deficit, which were made up by other things we can talk about later. But of course, since COVID started, there's been a steady trend downwards, so that in
Wow.
2022, our deficit, or the difference between our income and our outgo, is over $200,000.
Wow. Given that we have such a big deficit, and given that uh, it's getting bigger, and it really is quite big right now, can you explain to me how it is then that you say that this isn't fatal? That you say it's serious but not fatal. Where is this going if we don't change anything? What, because this sure looks serious.
It certainly is serious. 5 bits here, the blue
Uh-huh.
line or block, columns are, as you can see, 2018 through 2022.
Uh-huh.
I've extrapolated, just assuming that we just carry on as we are, and you can see the trend started in 2020, and it's basically just going down. And as I've highlighted at the bottom of that, if you add, I mean, by 2026, as you can see from the scale here, we're looking at $400,000 deficit, almost twice what we are today. But importantly, when you add up what the cumulative deficit is for these 4 years, 23, 4, 5, and 6, it's actually $1.3 million. And you know what that figure is? It
What?
happens to equal our investment portfolio that we own right now, which
Okay. So if
means
I understand you right, we are in deficit spending. So it's not that we're not paying bills, because if we weren't paying bills, then we wouldn't have light and we wouldn't have heat and we wouldn't have clergy. But the way we're paying bills is we're actually pulling money out of our investments. And if we keep doing that and we keep doing it at the rate that we're going, by the time we get to 2026, there will be no investments left, no savings left.
I haven't said yet how much we're taking out of our investments each month.
How
If you
much are we?
follow 2022, we are taking currently $22,500 per month out of our
Oh
investment.
my.
We have a $200,000 deficit. What else can we do?
Right. Right.
That's our dilemma. Uh,
Okay. Well, I can absolutely see why you say that this is serious. And in saying that it's serious but not fatal, I assume that you think that we can do something differently. So what can we do now?
okay. Luckily, we have the Transforming Futures people, as you may recall, who are looking
Mm,
into sort of strategic planning about where can we go and changes for the 5 to 10-year horizon.
good.
That, is uncovering lots of interesting ideas. But my point in saying it's not fatal is that we do have time, as I said earlier, to
Mhm.
make some changes to operation if we have the will and agreement to do that.
Okay.
There are 2 ways essentially to erase a deficit or reduce a deficit. One is you increase your revenue,
Hmm.
and the most likely way, for example, in the short run to do that is actually increasing our rental income, for
Hmm.
example.
Hmm.
We're renovating, as you may know, the lower hall at this point, and if we can, let that out, for example, permanently or on a regular basis or something like that, then that would bring in some regular revenue.
Hmm.
The other way, of course, to reduce your deficit is, of course, to cut expenses. And to make significant changes there, this is why I go back to saying that half of all our expenses are payroll. And that's the really difficult one, because it's not easy to cut staff, either clergy or lay people. I mean, that's not something we're going to do quickly or without a lot of thought. There may be other changes we can make, and then the next video we will talk more about that. But in principle, if you want to cut into a $200,000 deficit and you're spending about half of our 300 and over 300,000 in payroll, you don't have much space to cut into other expenses without thinking seriously about that. But that's why I say it's not fatal, because we don't have to throw up our hands and say, oh, woe is me, we're bound for the garbage can.
Okay, well, I think that this has given me a really good sense of the big picture, and that the big picture is that we currently are in a deficit because we're spending more than we're bringing in,
Mhm.
but that we have some time to turn things around. Turning things around means we have to do things differently. We have to think about some other ways of doing things, and those other ways of doing things can involve both spending less and bringing in more. I think our next video is really going to focus on those expenses and really digging in. So I'm really looking forward to you walking me through those so that we can figure out some ways that we might notice places where we're spending money, and also think about what possibly people might want to think about when they think about savings or cutting. So that's what I'm looking forward to in the next video. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.